We'll be joined remotely by political analyst Jayson Smart to discuss the recent scenarios and developments around the future developments in Russia. Hello, sir. Good to see you in the morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Do you think that Russia is preparing something big in terms of the December 5 will come and the embargo on the importing the Russian energy resources will be implemented into life from the European perspective? That maybe nothing more will be linking the Russia with the customers on the western part of the European continent, and maybe a big strike is in the making.
So yeah, there's a lot going on with Russia, and I think the implementation of any embargo against Russia is going to be a good thing. The reality is that the country is suffering, which is what we want. It's a corrective measure to help Russia and its people to see that the path that they're on is one that is destructive not only for Ukraine, the world, but also for Russia and Russians. And we see that Russia is affected by this. As you know, there's a lot of talk right now that a massive attack on Ukraine is imminent, probably the next day, today, in the next 2 days, but in the immediate future. And that attack is going to be something that is a sign of Putin's failure to be able to win the war in Ukraine. And he's resorting now to larger attacks on the energy sector and civilian critical infrastructure structures, specifically because he knows that his country must desperately win the war in Ukraine because it has demonstrated to the entire world its great weakness up to this point.
How desperate might be Putin in the moment, in your opinion?
I think that Putin is incredibly desperate. And the fact is he's opened himself to endless problems, and not just problems with the West, not just our sanctions, but the entire world has seen that the Russian military, always called the second greatest military in the world, is nothing more than a paper tiger. It is a weak military with weak military leadership, and it's undercut and destroyed by corruption. And that corruption goes to the very top, including Vladimir Putin himself, who is corrupt, and he steals from the Russian people. And he is the reason that their country is a disaster, and it will continue to be a disaster as long as he remains in political leadership.
Do we see first signs of the moves that may be even trying to cross the borders? In Belarus recently, there has been a sudden passing away of the chief of diplomacy, Vladimir Makey. And currently, the recent press coverage in Ukrainian media say that Lukashenko, president of Belarus, might be fearing of his own life replacing his staff, the people around him. Do you think that it may be instigated by Russia?
Absolutely. I mean, Putin, listen, the guy is a murderer. He has killed plenty of people, including in his own circle, including people that were located in Europe, in Britain. And we see that he has no respect for international law. So would he kill an ally like Lukashenko? Absolutely. I think Lukashenko realizes very well that his life has no value. He's a used car that could just be thrown away at any moment and replaced by something better. Nobody needs him. And that's because he's not intelligent. That's clear. And so to replace someone like him is not difficult. There's lots of other fools that could take that job. But yeah, killing or the death of this Minister of Foreign Affairs just a couple of days ago, why did that happen? Well, I think that the popular sentiment is that the man was quite young, 60 or 62, if I recall correctly, to fall over dead like this. Coming up 54. So it's even younger than I thought. And to fall over dead like this is not common. And so why would this happen? Well, I think that, the guy was no longer necessary. He was just used until he was no longer serving a purpose, and he was gotten rid of. And I think that this is the way that whole regime works. Anyone who doubts the cruelty, the nepotism of it, the total lack of morality, please just take a look at Belarus and its disgusting dictatorship, which continues to abuse the people of Belarus. It continues to cause problems for Europe. And why does it do it? There's no ideology. There's nothing about improving Belarus that they do this. There's nothing about having a different view of the world. It's pure self-interest of the top leadership to continue enabling themselves and their policy, their circle, to rob the people, to rob the country for their own economic benefit. It is as simple as that. There is no further ideology associated with the Putin regime or the Lukashenko regime than that.
So should we look for the possible signs of political thaw in Belarus, as the Lukashenko staying in office since 1994, so nearly for 3 decades? He should be, of course, from Moscow point of view, he may be considered as an ally, but at the same time as an enemy. But you should keep your enemy as close as possible, according to the proverbial knowledge. So a thaw in the making, Belarus, and Moscow tries to stop it?
I think that he has no intention of liberalizing the country in any serious way. That being said, he is an ally of Moscow, absolutely the case. But it doesn't mean that he can't be replaced with a better ally or somebody that the Russia would prefer to have. And to simply replace him, I mean, you'd have to get rid of him first. That is, they'd have to kill him. But that's not hard. I mean, that's pretty easy. Russia's good at killing people, especially killing their own friends. And then tossing his body. Yeah, I guess there'd be a thaw in the spring when the earth finally thaws out from the winter. His body will thaw, but otherwise I don't expect any other sort of thaw to happen in Belarus. Absolutely no political thaw, no diplomatic thaw. The country is in a complete lock with Moscow and has no other options.
How about the cooperation with CSTO countries from Moscow point of view?
The CSTO countries are really being set back. And we see that in the case of Armenia's rejection of what they've seen as an abuse by Moscow. When they've asked for help, they were not able to help with Azerbaijan. We see with Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan, two countries that had conflict just a few months ago, were firing on each other's positions. This is all showing signs that Moscow is unable to actually support the CSTO members. And any country bad luck of being in that group, that alignment, I think recognize at this point that Moscow has no ability and no desire, importantly no desire, to help them if there is some sort of a security concern. All those countries are incredibly weak right now. And they're being weakened further by sanctions against Russia, given that their economies are all tied to Russia to a degree much higher than other countries, much higher than a European country. And so I think that the suffering that these countries are going to suffer, they're going to feel in the coming months and years is only going to increase as they choose to stay closer to a dictator like Vladimir Putin.
Among the CSTO 6 countries, so Russia and the 5 others, can we use a saying as well, the old one, in the eye of the blind, the one-eyed is a king, describing Putin?
It's a good expression, actually. I didn't know that one. But I think that there's a very strong chance that Vladimir Putin in the world that he is inhibiting, in a world that he is the dominant partner. Yes, and he also is the one who allows the corruption of those other leaders. I don't think that anyone really believes that the government of Turkmenistan, for instance, is anything more than just a sort of fake government. The man operates as just looting his kingdom day after day, but he gives full allegiance to Moscow, and that's really the only thing he's required to do. There's nothing else required of him. And for Russia, it's the territory. It's not the people that matter. So the people of Turkmenistan suffer probably worse than North Koreans, and I think that is an accurate statement, worse than North Koreans. And does Moscow care about that? Is Moscow worried about their well-being or their lives improving? Absolutely not. Russia only cares about the fact that the country, the physical territory of Turkmenistan, the physical country of Tajikistan or Kazakhstan or Kyrgyzstan, etc., that those territories remain close to Moscow. That is the only thing that they're concerned about.
Do you think that there is any chance that some leader, like for example here we see Vladimir Putin waiting for President Erdogan a few months ago, may outsmart the Russian leader?
Well, I mean, I think that Erdogan is somebody who Putin does respect. He's stated that publicly several times. Erdogan is a very interesting statesman. And I'll be frank, yes, he's criticized a lot, but he is someone who I think has a lot of influence with the Russian leadership. Because he is not a traditional Western leader, let's say. He is different than that. But he is also a NATO member, and he has been supportive of NATO. The steps he's taken have supported NATO. And Erdogan is somebody who, if there's going to be any changes in Russia, Erdogan is somebody who I think could broker those changes because he is well respected, and he's also somebody who is taken as serious. He's also, I think, geopolitically, a long-term threat for Russia in his idea of expansive Turkic worldview, especially throughout Central Asia, where Russia is competing for influence. But that's a very long-term interest. The most immediate dominant today question, how does this affect the regional geopolitics and the regional hegemony of Moscow? I think that it is significant. I think that Erdogan is somebody who is posing a direct threat, but also a direct possibility for negotiations with Russia.
And getting back to the war in Ukraine, who do you think is better prepared militarily for the winter coming there? Russians or Ukrainians?
Oh, definitely the Ukrainians. I mean, the West is giving weapons as well as to clothing, as well as heaters, as well as generators to the Ukrainians. The Russians are being sent with 1 to 3 or 4 days of training to Ukraine, completely unprepared. And even the estimates of the Russian government, which you probably saw last week, the leaks that came out, they're estimating they'll lose more than 100,000 soldiers due to the cold, which is just stunning. I cannot imagine that. But it shows you that there's a complete lack of value to the lives of even their own soldiers. They simply don't care. Russia at this point has lost over 100,000 soldiers, was one estimate, in casualties. And injured, we're talking several 100,000 Russian soldiers have already been taken out of the war, either to injury or being killed. And this is just stunning. I mean, it's shockingly high numbers. Even the Ukrainian, I think, estimate is that it's around 85,000 Russian soldiers have died. If you consider that the casualty rates typically, that is, those that are injured, not just killed, is typically several times higher than that. Do the math yourself. I mean, if it's 3 times higher, okay, then it's around 240,000 soldiers injured and around 80,000 killed. It's just stunning to me to think that more than 300,000 Russians might have been directly adversely affected by this war, in a physical sense, killed or injured. That's stunning, which shows you Vladimir Putin's complete lack of empathy even for his own people.
And the amount of support of NATO countries received by the chief of Ukrainian diplomacy, Dmytro Kuleba, yesterday and I guess today as well, continuing the summit in Bucharest, will be enough?
I think the NATO support's been very strong. And, to be specific, though, even in Ukraine, as you know very well, when you're in Kiev, and I'll be back there in just day after tomorrow, but when you're in Kiev, you hear the very strong support and appreciation. I think it's an important word to mention here, the appreciation for the support that has been received from countries, namely from countries like Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, as well as from Poland. Poland is a country that's constantly mentioned as someone who's shown itself to be a great ally. More than many of the NATO countries have been these specific countries, Britain as well, I should definitely mention Britain, and the United States, have been great supporters. And I think that the help coming from namely those 5 countries above all else has been just something that's really been able to allow Ukraine to make it this far in the war. And the support from countries such as Poland, I can only hope continues, and I'm sure will continue. Poland has been a great ally. Will continue, because this is something that is defending not only, obviously, Ukraine and Ukrainians against Russian aggression, but this is something that will defend ultimately NATO in the long term.
Russian bombers have been spotted amassing on one of the airports in the vicinity of Ukraine, preparing probably for the massive carpet bombing of Ukrainian cities. Do you think that we may expect such move by Putin in the nearest future?
Yeah, I think that there's imminent attack. It's going to be any day or hour. I've been checking my phone constantly, but yes, I think that it's going to be any second, any moment. It will begin, and it is going to be massive. At this point, there's been more than 20 airplanes prepared, as the last report I read. Historically, there was only about 11 airplanes that were used in any given attack. It was the maximum, 11. 20 airplanes is significant. They've also reloaded in the Black Sea. The ships have been reloaded with various types of missiles. The more modern missiles, actually, the ballistic missiles that they've put on the ships are significant. Also, we looked at what's going on in the case of Belarus on the border. As you know, they've also placed the airplanes as well as soldiers. And in southern Russia, in the areas where they've historically done it, they've been, like Belgrade, they've been hosting more and more soldiers as well as more and more missiles. So Ukraine will be struck from the north, from the east, and from the south simultaneously. It will be a significant attack, and it will most likely target the probably 24 energy substations that have been historically targeted, which are the ones that are responsible for the vast majority of the energy for Ukraine. So once the substations are destroyed, Ukraine could be turning dark for months.
And as you say, the last question, as you say, from the north as well, the attack will come, may come, at least. So will it mean that Belarus will be incorporated into this Russian war machine?
I think the day is coming, and I think that's the reason that Lukashenko's days may be numbered, is that if he poses a threat to that or doesn't openly support that, he will be punished by Russia. And the way he'll be punished is by paying with his life. And so it'll be no loss to humanity or to Belarus that he dies, but it'll simply be a sign that the larger war is expanding.
Thank you very much for your time and insight. Jayson Smart, political analyst, was our guest. Have a good day, sir. Thank you again.
Thank you, sir.
And of course, much more still to come on TVP World. Stay with us for more.